My mother called me last Tuesday. She was crying, deep, ragged sobs, the kind that used to make me drop everything and run to her side. She said the doctors weren't explaining things properly, that nobody was listening to her, that she needed someone who could translate all the medical jargon, someone she trusted.
She needed me.
I let her finish. I sat there in my office, with my name on the door and my medical license framed on the wall, and I let every word land. Then I said, very quietly, "I'll look into it, Mom." And I did. Because I'm a doctor now. Because I made that happen. Alone. With zero support from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My name is Dr. Ellie Marsh. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my parents cut off my medical treatment when I was 16, told me I was exaggerating, a condition that was slowly stealing my life, and then, 17 years later, ended up sitting across from me in a hospital corridor, needing everything I had worked so hard to become. I want you to understand something before I begin. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't scheme or plot or wait for karma to come around. I just survived. I built something from the ruins they left me in. And then life, in its strange and exact way, handed me the last chapter of a story that started in the worst possible pain. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio, the middle child of 3. My older brother, Derek, was the athlete, broad-shouldered, effortlessly charming, the kind of kid coaches called a natural. My younger sister, Becca, was the baby, the one who could cry on command and redirect every room with a single pout. And then there was me, Ellie, the quiet one, the reader, the one who asked too many questions and got called intense by teachers who didn't know what else to do with me. My father, Ron, was a contractor. He worked hard, came home tired, and had very little patience for complexity. My mother, Diane, was the emotional center of the house, which sounds warm, but wasn't. She was the kind of woman who confused control with love. Everything ran through her. Every decision, every family narrative, every version of each of us that the world was allowed to see. And the version of me she preferred was the one that didn't need anything. Derek's football fees were never questioned. Becca's dance classes, her braces, her anxiety counseling in 8th grade, all handled without hesitation. But I was resilient. I was the strong one. Those words followed me like a curse. When I was 14, I started having symptoms that I now know are textbook for juvenile-onset lupus. Fatigue that felt like gravity had doubled. Joint pain that woke me up at 3 in the morning. A butterfly-shaped rash across my cheeks that my mother called rosacea and suggested I cover with foundation. I told her it hurt to walk sometimes. She told me to stop being dramatic. I told my father I was exhausted even after 10 hours of sleep. He said, "We all get tired, Ellie. That's called being a teenager." By 15, I had missed so many school days that my guidance counselor called home. My mother told her I was going through a phase. She didn't tell her that I had started keeping a journal of my symptoms because I was afraid I was going insane, and writing them down was the only way I could prove to myself they were real. The first time I asked to see a doctor, really asked with specifics, I was 15. I had done research. I had printed out articles from medical journals, which I'd found through the public library's database, because I was that kind of 15-year-old. I sat at the kitchen table, and I laid out my symptoms in organized, clear language, and I said, "I think something is wrong with my immune system." My mother looked at the papers. She looked at me. Then she looked at my father. "Where is she getting this?" she said. Not to me.
About me.
As if I wasn't sitting right there. "Teen girls and WebMD," my father said, shaking his head. "Ellie, you're not sick. You're anxious." "I'm not anxious, I'm in pain," I said. "Then go to bed earlier," he said. And that was the end of that conversation. When I was 16, something shifted. The fatigue became so severe that I fainted in gym class. They called my parents. My mother arrived at the school, tight-lipped and embarrassed, and took me to an urgent care clinic. Not because she believed me, I understood later, but because she was afraid of what the school would think if she didn't. The urgent care doctor ran some preliminary blood work. She came back into the room with a look on her face that I had never seen directed at me before. She looked at me like I was telling the truth. She said my ANA levels were elevated. She said she wanted to refer me to a rheumatologist. She said the word lupus out loud for the first time, carefully, like it was a door she was opening gently. I remember the feeling in that exam room. Not fear. Relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. Something was genuinely wrong, and now someone with authority was saying so. My mother asked how much the specialist would cost. The doctor said it would depend on insurance. My mother smiled politely and thanked her. In the car, I said, "So we'll call the rheumatologist?" My mother said, "We'll see." "We'll see" was her way of saying no when she didn't want to fight right away. I waited 2 weeks. 3. I asked again. She said the referral was expensive and our deductible hadn't been met. I asked if we could do a payment plan. She looked at me like I had said something offensive. "Ellie, do you think money grows on trees? Your brother's knee surgery cost us thousands. We're still paying that off. Derek's knee surgery. For a football injury." That was the line she drew. Her son's sports injury versus her daughter's potentially serious autoimmune disease. I was 16 years old, and I started to understand in a cellular, bone-deep way that I was not equally valued in this house. The breaking point came 3 months after that urgent care visit. I had been managing, barely, pushing through school days on sheer willpower, coming home, and lying on my bed like something poured out of a glass. My grades were slipping for the first time in my life. I'd had to quit the science Olympiad team I'd been captain of for 2 years. I found a referral form in my mother's bedside drawer when I was looking for a pen. It had never been sent. It was still in its envelope, sealed, with the rheumatologist's address printed on the front. She had just never mailed it. I stood in her bedroom holding that envelope for a long time. I confronted her that evening. I put the envelope on the kitchen table between us. "You never sent it," I said. She looked at it, then at me. "Ellie, you never sent it," I said again. "It's been 3 months. I've been in pain for 3 months, and you just didn't send it. The copays, Ellie, we talked about." "Stop." My voice came out steady, which surprised both of us. "I've been telling you I'm sick for over a year. A doctor confirmed it. She wrote a referral. And you put it in a drawer." My father walked in from the other room. "What's all this about?" "Your daughter is making a scene," my mother said, and her voice had shifted into that particular register, slightly wounded, slightly exasperated, the tone she used when she wanted to make me the problem. I picked up the envelope. "I'm going to figure this out myself," I said. "I just needed you to know that I know." I went upstairs. I didn't cry. I was past crying about this. That night, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what form it would take yet, but I decided that whatever future I was going to have, I was going to build it without waiting for permission from people who kept me in their peripheral vision. What I did next might seem extraordinary, but it wasn't. It was just the logical result of being a resourceful person with no other options. I found out that our county had a sliding-scale community health clinic. I made an appointment myself. I walked there after school on a Wednesday, 40 minutes on foot, and I sat in the waiting room and I handed over the urgent care notes I'd saved and I said, "I think I have lupus and my parents haven't been able to get me to a specialist. Can you help me?" The doctor there, a quiet, thorough woman named Dr. Anand, looked at my labs.
She looked at me.
She ordered new blood work on the spot and ran a full panel. She coordinated with a rheumatologist who volunteered 1 day a month at the clinic. By age 17, I had a confirmed lupus diagnosis, and I was on a medication protocol that cost me almost nothing through a patient assistance program I had researched and applied for myself. I didn't tell my parents. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I had already learned that their involvement made things harder, not easier. So I built a medical support system entirely outside of them. I kept my own records. I kept my own appointments. I asked Dr. Anand every question I could think of, and she answered them all with patience that I still think about to this day. Something happened to me in that clinic. I started to understand medicine not as this distant, intimidating institution, but as a system you could learn, navigate, advocate within. And I started to understand that the people inside it, the good ones, had an extraordinary kind of power. The power to tell the truth about someone's body when the people who were supposed to love them were too uncomfortable to look. I wanted that power. Not for revenge. For purpose. I graduated in the top 3% of my class. I applied for every scholarship I could find. Academic, need-based essays, local organizations, national competitions. I wrote about chronic illness. I wrote about self-advocacy. I wrote honest, controlled, devastating essays about what it means to be unbelieved by the people who made you. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State, pre-med. My parents took me out to dinner to celebrate. They told everyone at the table what a remarkable daughter they had raised. I smiled and said thank you and thought about the envelope in the drawer. College was the first time in my life that I felt fully like myself. I managed my lupus carefully, medication, sleep, stress monitoring, regular check-ins with the University Health Center. I had a 504 accommodation plan for flares. I had professors who treated my self-reported limitations as valid. I thrived in an environment that required me to prove my intelligence through effort rather than through suffering and silence. I didn't go home much. My parents noticed, but didn't press. I was doing so well and they were proud, or at least they were proud of the story. The contractor's daughter going to medical school. They started telling people before I'd even been accepted. When I got into medical school, a top 12 program, my mother cried on the phone. She said, "I always knew you'd do something like this." I held the phone. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about being 16, walking 40 minutes to a free clinic. I thought about Dr. Anand's quiet patience. I thought about the referral envelope, sealed and unfiled in a drawer.
Thanks, Mom, I said.
And I went back to my life. Medical school was brutal and beautiful. I specialized in internal medicine with a focus on autoimmune and rheumatological conditions. My own diagnosis was not incidental to this choice. I understood these patients from the inside out. I understood the frustration of invisible illness, the damage done when symptoms are dismissed, the specific loneliness of being told you are inventing your own suffering. I graduated. I completed my residency. I joined a practice in Columbus. My parents came to my graduation. There are photos of all of us smiling. My father put his arm around me and said, "We did it, kid." I noticed the we. I didn't correct it. Part 7, the confrontation. The call I told you about at the beginning, my mother calling, crying, came 2 months into my second year of practice. My father had been having symptoms: joint pain, fatigue, swelling in his hands. His primary care physician had flagged some blood work and referred him to a rheumatologist, but there was a 3-month wait. My mother, characteristically, wanted to bypass the system. She wanted her doctor daughter to pull strings, to translate, to fix it. I agreed to come home for a weekend. Not for dramatic reasons. Not to confront them. Honestly, part of me was just curious. And part of me, even after everything, still loved them in that complicated, bruised way that doesn't fully go away. I sat with my father at that kitchen table, the same one from my childhood, still in the same spot, and I reviewed his records. I asked him the same careful questions I asked all my patients. His symptoms were consistent with early-stage rheumatoid arthritis. Manageable. Treatable. He was going to be okay. I told him this. His face flooded with visible relief. "So you can help us?" my mother said. "You can get him seen faster?" "I can write a letter to the specialist's office flagging clinical urgency," I said. "That should move up his appointment." "Good," she said, already leaning back, already comfortable. Already assuming the crisis was resolved and she could stop worrying. There was a pause. The kitchen was quiet. The afternoon light came through the same window it always had. "Mom," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "Do you remember when I was 16? When the urgent care doctor referred me to a rheumatologist?" She looked at me. Something shifted behind her eyes, recognition, maybe, or the beginning of discomfort. "Ellie, that was a long time ago." "I found the envelope," I said. "In your drawer. It was still sealed. You never sent it." My father looked between us. "I don't know what you do," I said gently. Not with anger.
I want to be clear about that. It wasn't anger by then.
"I'm not saying this to fight. I just need you to know that I know." I've known for 17 years. I managed my illness alone, starting at 16. I found my own clinic, my own specialist, my own funding, and it made me the doctor sitting at this table right now. My mother's jaw had tightened. We did the best we could. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I meant it. I don't need one. I made peace with this a long time ago. I just needed to say it out loud at this table because I think it's important that the truth lives somewhere other than just inside me. A silence stretched out. My father was looking at the table. My mother had her hands folded in her lap. I thought you were exaggerating, she finally said, very quietly. I know you did. We were stretched thin. With Derek's. I know, I said. I understand all of it. That doesn't change what it was. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something I had not expected. Not defensiveness.
Shame.
Old, accumulated shame that had been sitting untouched for years. I'm sorry, Ellie, she said. I looked at my mother. I thought about what that apology would have meant to me at 16. The 16-year-old who walked 40 minutes in November to a community health clinic because she had no one to take her. I thought about what it cost my mother to say those words. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. That wasn't the whole story, of course. There were more conversations after that weekend. My father cried once, which I had never seen before and didn't fully know how to receive. My brother Derek called me, awkward and stumbling, to say he hadn't known how bad it had been, and he was sorry. Becca sent me a long, handwritten letter that I still have. It was not a Hollywood ending. Families don't work that way. Here is the part you might expect to be triumphant, and in some ways it was. But the justice that I experienced was quieter and stranger than I ever imagined. My father's RA was caught early. Because I flagged it correctly and advocated for him aggressively, he saw the specialist within 2 weeks instead of 3 months. He started treatment quickly. Today, 3 years later, he manages his condition well. Medication, lifestyle changes, the whole protocol. He sometimes calls me with questions. I answer them. He told me recently on the phone that he knows what I did for him, that he doesn't take it for granted, that he thinks about 16-year-old me walking to that clinic and it makes him feel terrible, which is his way of expressing a remorse he doesn't have the vocabulary for. You don't have to feel terrible, I told him. Just be honest about it. That's enough. My mother and I have a relationship now that I would describe as careful and genuinely affectionate. She comes to Columbus sometimes. She has met my partner, Jess, who is also a physician, and she is, to her credit, trying hard. Not perfectly, but trying. There is no version of the story where my parents become different people. They are who they are. They made the choices they made. I don't carry those choices for them anymore. What I do carry is this. I am one of the leading rheumatology-focused internists in my region. My practice has a specific protocol for patients who present with undiagnosed chronic conditions and a history of dismissal by family members, by previous physicians, by a medical system that has not always been kind to people whose suffering doesn't show up neatly on initial blood work. I have a particular approach with teenage patients. I listen for a long time before I respond. I have had more than one patient cry in my exam room when I told them that their symptoms were real, documented, and treatable. I know what that moment feels like from the other side of it. I don't take that lightly. That is my justice. Not the dramatic kind. The useful kind. Now, standing in my life at 34, in the office with my name on the door, managing my own lupus with the same careful discipline I've had since I was 17, building a practice that I'm genuinely proud of, I sometimes try to trace the line. The sealed envelope in the drawer. The 40-minute walk in November. Dr. Anand's patient face. The scholarship essays. The residency nights where I barely slept. And then the afternoon at the kitchen table where I finally said, out loud, what I had carried for 17 years. I don't think my parents were monsters. I think they were limited people who made a terrible and consequential mistake. I think my mother chose her comfort over my health, and my father chose not to look too closely at what that cost me. I think they loved me in the diminished, distracted way that some parents do. Not enough, but not nothing. What I know is that their failure to show up made me show up for myself. And showing up for myself, At 16, alone in a community health clinic with printed research articles and a journal full of my own symptoms, that act of radical self-advocacy changed the entire shape of my life. I don't wish it on anyone. The loneliness of it, the specific grief of being 16 and realizing your parents have quietly decided you are less worth protecting than your brother's football career. But I am standing here. I am here, in the life I built, with the work I chose, with a clarity about what matters that I don't think I would have if things had been easier. If you are in a family where your health, your physical, documented real health, is being dismissed or minimized or traded off against other priorities, I want you to hear this. You are not being dramatic. Your body is telling you the truth. Find the people who will believe you. Look for the Dr. Anands of the world. They exist. Community clinics exist. Patient advocacy resources exist. And whatever age you are, 16 or 46, you are allowed to take yourself seriously, even when the people who raised you don't. The envelope was never sent. So, I became the letter myself. I delivered it.